As the sun peeked over the horizon, casting golden rays through my bedroom window, I woke with a sense of anticipation. Today was my 25th birthday, a milestone that I had been eagerly awaiting. Little did I know that it would soon become a haunting memory. After a celebratory breakfast with my family, I decided to venture out for a leisurely stroll in a nearby park. As I ambled along the winding paths, the crisp autumn air invigorated my senses. The vibrant hues of the fallen leaves painted a breathtaking tapestry beneath my feet. Lost in contemplation, I rounded a bend and gasped in horror. There, amidst the fading foliage, lay the lifeless body of a young woman. Her eyes stared blankly into the void, and her skin bore the gruesome marks of violence. A wave of icy terror washed over me as I realized the gravity of the situation. Frozen in place, I watched as a shadowy figure emerged from the underbush. Its eyes gleamed with an eerie luminescence, and its jagged teeth were bared in a menacing snarl. The creature lunged at me with a lightning speed, its sharp claws raking at my flesh. Pain exploded through my body as I staggered backwards, desperate to escape its clutches. But the creature was relentless, its pursuit fueled by insatiable bloodlust. I stumbled and fell, my body racked with agony as the creature closed in, its tethered breath hot on my neck. In that moment of utter despair, I thought all hope was lost. But then, from the depths of my consciousness, a surge of adrenaline surged through me. With a newfound determination, I fought back against my tormentor, kicking and screaming with all my might. The creature let out a piercing howl as I managed to land a blow to its head. It staggered backwards, giving me a precious moment to scramble to my feet and flee. I ran as fast as my trembling legs would carry me, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. Behind me, I could hear the creature's heavy footsteps in pursuit. Its guttural growls sent shivers down my spine, fueling my desperation to escape. I dodged and weaved through the trees, my body aching with every step. Finally, I stumbled upon a clearing and burst into a nearby cottage. The door was unlocked, and I threw myself inside, panting heavily with clutching my wounds. As I locked the door behind me, I collapsed on the floor, my body trembling uncontrollably. As the adrenaline subsided, the full horror of my situation dawned upon me. I had survived a brutal attack, but I was far from safe. The creature could still be lurking outside, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Fear gnawed at my mind as I peered out of the window, my eyes scanning for the darkness for any sign of movement. The night was pitch black, and the wind howled like a banshee, carrying with it the sound of distant footsteps. Every creak and groan in the old cottage sent a jolt of terror through me. I listened intently, my senses heightened to the point of paranoia. The slightest noise sent me leaping on my feet, my heart pounding in my ears. As the long, torturous hours passed, I began to lose hope. The creature seemed to have vanished, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that it was still out there, biding its time. Despair threatened to consume me. Just when my resolve was about to break, I heard a faint scratching sound at the door. My heart caught in my throat as I slowly approached, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. With a trembling hand, I turned the knob and pulled the door open a crack. A cold gust of wind met my face, and I gasped in horror. There, standing in the dim light of the moon, was the creature. Its eyes burned with a malevolent intensity, and its razor-sharp teeth were bared in a cruel grin. Frozen in place, I watched as the creature slowly advanced towards me. Its every step sent a wave of terror through my body. I knew that this time there was no escape. As the creature reached out its gnarled claws, I closed my eyes and waited for the inevitable. But then, something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed through the night, and the creature let out a piercing scream. I opened my eyes and saw a figure standing in the doorway, wielding a shotgun. The creature stumbled backwards, its body riddled with buckshot. As it fell to the ground, the figure approached me, their face obscured by the shadows. "Are you all right?" a gruff voice asked. I nodded weakly, too stunned to speak. The figure helped me to my feet and led me outside, where a police car was waiting. I was taken to the hospital, where I received treatment for my wounds. As I lay in my hospital bed, I couldn't help but wonder what had happened. Who was the mysterious figure who had saved my life? And why had the creature attacked me in the first place? The answers to those questions remained elusive, but I was grateful to be alive. My birthday had turned into a nightmare, but it had also taught me the value of resilience and the importance of never giving up hope. In the weeks that followed, I slowly recovered from my physical and emotional wounds. The horrors I have experienced that night would forever haunt my dreams, but I refused to let them define me. Instead, I choose to focus on the future and the blessing that it held. And so, my 25th birthday became a bittersweet memory, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the shadows and the indomitable spirit that resides within us all. As the clock struck midnight, heralding the arrival of my 23rd birthday, I felt a surge of melancholy wash over me. The laughter and cheers of my celebrating friends seemed distant and hollow, a cruel memory of my impending doom. Days earlier, I had received a peculiar gift from an enigmatic old woman. It was a wooden box, intricately carved with symbols and adorned with a heavy brass lock. The woman warned me in a hushed whisper that it held a terrible secret that would haunt me forever if I dared open it. Despite my growing unease, curiosity gnawed at me. On my birthday, I found myself in my dimly lit apartment, the box resting ominously on the coffee table. The resilience of the night pressed down on me, suffocating my thoughts. Mustering a trembling hand, I reached for the brass lock and turned the key. The box groaned open, revealing its macabre contents. Inside lay a single yellowed photograph, a haunting image of a young woman with piercing eyes and a haunting smile. As I gazed at the photograph, a chilling realization washed over me. The woman in the picture was my exact double, down to the smallest detail. Her name was scribbled on the back in a faded ink. Eleanor. A surge of icy terror ran through my veins as I felt an inexplicable connection to this unknown stranger. Moments later, my body began to tremble uncontrollably, my vision blurred, and a putrid stench filled the air. I felt a sharp pain in my chest and coughed up a mouthful of blood. My screams echoed through the empty apartment, but they were swallowed by the suffocating darkness. As the agony intensified, I stumbled to my feet and stumbled towards the window, desperate for air. But as I reached for the curtains, I was horrified to see my own reflection staring back at me from the glass. Eleanor's eyes burned with an otherworldly glow, her smile twisted with a sinister grin. Panic seized me as I realized that the woman in the photograph was not a stranger at all. She was a malevolent entity that had somehow taken possession of my body. I fought desperately, but my resistance was futile. Eleanor's cold, merciless eyes watched with amusement as she extinguished the last remnants of my consciousness. When I woke, I was in a different place. It was dark, desolate room with cold stone walls and the musty smell of decay. A single buried window allowed a faint glimmer of light to penetrate the suffocating gloom. As my eyes adjusted, I realized that I was trapped in a dungeon. The walls were covered in a grotesque graffiti, scrawled in blood and human feces. I stumbled to my feet, the cold, damp floor sending shivers down my spine. Fear gnawed at me as I explored my prison. There was no food or water, and the air was thick with the stench of death. I was alone in this forsaken place, doomed to a slow and agonizing demise. Days turned into nights, and still I languished in my living tomb. Hunger and thirst tormented my body, and despair consumed my mind. I cried out for help, but my pleas were met only with silence. One night, I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the wall behind me. I held my breath, listening intently. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. I pressed my ear against the cold stone, but all I could hear was the beating of my own terrified heart. Suddenly, the wall began to crack and crumble, revealing a narrow, dark passageway. I hesitated for a moment, torn between hope and terror. But desperation drove me forward, and I crawled through the opening into the unknown. The passageway twisted and turned, its walls closing in on me like the jaws of a hungry beast. I stumbled and fell, but I forced myself to continue crawling. Finally, I reached to the end of the tunnel and emerged into a small, dimly lit room. The room was filled with flickering candles, casting an eerie glow on the walls. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table, and on top of the table lay a single, bloody knife. As I approached the table, I realized that the knife was not alone. There was a human hand lying next to it, its fingers curled into a deathly grip. I gasped in horror and stumbled backward, my heart pounding in my chest. But before I could flee, the door to the room slammed shut behind me. I was trapped, alone with a bloody hand with the ominous knife. Frozen in terror, I watched as the candles began to flicker violently. The shadow danced and swayed, transforming into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock my fear. I felt my sanity slipping away as the darkness enveloped me, suffocating my hope like a cold, wet blanket. Suddenly, I heard a faint moan behind me. I turned slowly, my eyes wide with terror, and saw Eleanor standing in the doorway. Her eyes burned with the infernal glow, and her smile was twisted into a malevolent sneer. "Happy birthday, my dear," she whispered in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "It's time for you to die." With lightning speed, she lunged at me with a bloody knife. I dodged her attack, stumbled backward, but her relentless pursuit was too much for me to bear. Concerned and desperate, I grabbed my nearby candlestick and hurled it at her. The candlestick struck her in the head, and she let out a deafening scream. The bloody knife fell from her grasp, and I seized the opportunity to flee. I stumbled and fell, but I managed to crawl towards the open passageway. As I passed out of the room, I could hear Eleanor's enraged screams echoing behind me. I crawled and crawled, driven by a primal instinct to survive. The tunnel seemed endless, but I refused to give up. Finally, I reached to the end of the passageway and collapsed on the cold, damp floor. I had escaped, but I knew that my nightmare was far from over. Eleanor would be waiting for me, lurking in the shadows, biding her time for revenge. I stumbled down to the dungeon and screamed for help, but my voice is lost in the vastness of the forest. As I run, I can hear Eleanor's laughter echoing through the trees, a cruel and mocking sound that haunts my every step. The night is dark and endless. I am lost and alone. I can feel Eleanor's presence closing in on me, her icy breath on my neck. I know that she will find me, and when she does, she will finish what she started. And so, I run. I run until my lungs burn and my legs give away. I run until I collapse on the cold, unforgiving ground, my body broken and my spirit shattered. Eleanor stands over me, her eyes glowing with triumph. She raises the bloody knife high above her head, and as she plunges into my flesh, I feel the cold embrace of death. My last breath escapes me in a desperate whisper. Happy birthday to me. The day dawned with promises of joy and merrymaking, but little did I know that my birthday would descend into a nightmare that would forever etch itself into the archives of my memory. Earlier that morning, as the sun peeked over the horizon, casting its golden rays upon me as I slept in, my mother had greeted me with a tender kiss for a heartfelt wish for a day filled with laughter and love. With childlike glee, I had skipped down the stairs, my heart overflowing with excitement. Breakfast was a delightful feast, complete with fluffy pancakes and fresh fruit. My family and friends gathered around the table, their cheerful chatter filling the air with a sense of warmth and camaraderie. As we shared stories and sipped on black coffee, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude from the blessing in my life. After the breakfast, my friends insisted on taking me out for the day of adventure. We embarked on a scenic hike through a nearby forest, where towering trees cast intricate shadows upon the sun-dappled path. As we explored the hidden nooks and crannies of a woodland, the sound of our laughter echoed through the verdant canopy. Time seemed to slip away as we made our way to the secluded waterfall. Its thunderous roar filled the air, creating a mesmerizing symphony that washed over us like a soothing balm. We marveled at its beauty, capturing the moment with our cameras before deciding to take a refreshing dip in the crystal-clear pool at its base. As I submerged myself in the icy water, a shiver ran down my spine. The chilling sensation persisted, but I diminished it as a momentary lapse in judgment. However, as I resurfaced, my blood ran cold. My friends, who had been frolicking in the water just moments before, were nowhere to be seen. Panic surged through me as I frantically scanned my surroundings, calling out their names, but my cries were met with an eerie silence. In a moment of desperation, I scrambled out of the pool and began searching for any sign of my companions. I stumbled through the underbush, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest, which had once been so inviting, now seemed like a labyrinth of shadows, filled with unseen threats. As darkness enveloped the forest, my fear reached its peak. The trees seemed to whisper mockingly, the branches reaching out like grasping claws. The once familiar sounds of nature now filled me with terror. Every rustling leaf, every snapping twig sent shivers down my spine. Suddenly, a guttural growl pierced the silence. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. Slowly, I turned my head towards the source of the sound, my eyes wide with terror. There, standing amidst the trees, was a creature that defied description. Its eyes glowed a supernatural red, and its razor-sharp teeth were bared in a menacing snarl. Its fur were matted with blood and gore, and claws seemed capable of tearing through flesh with ease. Fear propelled me forward as I turned and ran. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from that horrifying creature. Behind me, I could hear the sound of heavy footsteps pursuing me, its growls growing louder with each passing moment. I stumbled through the darkness, my lungs burning and my legs screaming for respite, but I couldn't stop. Behind me, the monster was relentlessly closing in. With a surge of adrenaline, I leapt over a fallen log and crashed into a dense thicket. I huddled there, my body trembling uncontrollably. The monster's footsteps passed me by, and for a brief moment, silence descended upon the forest. But I knew it was only a matter of time before it found me again. As if to confirm my fears, I heard the unmistakable sound of its claws scraping against the bark of a nearby tree. It was circling, closing in my hiding spot. I squeezed my eyes shut and waited for the inevitable. Suddenly, the air around me grew heavy with an oppressive presence. I could feel the monster's foul breath on my skin, and its raspy voice whispered in my ear. "You cannot escape me," it hissed. "This is your birthday, and I've come to celebrate it in my own special way." I couldn't bear to listen to its taunts any longer. With a desperate cry, I jumped to my feet and ran. I stumbled and tripped over unseen obstacles, but I refused to give up. Behind me, the monster growled and gave chase. I ran until my legs buckled beneath me. I collapsed on the forest floor, my body racked with exhaustion and terror. The monster loomed over me, its eyes blazing with unholy fire. As its claws reached out to claim me, I closed my eyes and prepared for the end. But then a blinding light filled the darkness, and the monster let out a piercing wail. When I opened my eyes, the monster was gone. The forest was silent once more, save for the gentle rustling of leaves and the distant hooting of a howl. I sat there for a long moment, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Slowly, I stood up and made my way back to civilization. As I emerged from the forest, I was greeted by the warm glow of the rising sun. But the horrors I have witnessed that night would forever haunt my dreams, a grim reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of even the most joyous occasions.